is a book that my grandfather gave. It's a book like my grandfather gave to me when I was about 3 years old. And the name of the book is Fuzzy Dan. See Fuzzy Dan there? And there's a sign being put up on the wall that says, "Come to the rodeo, one and all, first prize." It's a big saddle. It says the busiest people in Sagebrush City were the ones that work on the sign committee. They pasted signs on every wall. "Come to the rodeo, one and all." From every door, folks hurried out to see what the noise was all about. They nodded and said, "This rodeo will be a dandy Wild West show." See the picture there? At the very moment the fun began, who rode into town but Fuzzy Dan? Fuzzy Dan had the fanciest vest and the brightest, fuzziest chaps in the West. He tied his horse to the hitching rail and started in to get his mail. When a cowboy sitting on the ground said, "Dan's the best rider for miles around," another shouted, "If you're wise, you'll win that saddle that's to be first prize." See Dan there? Can you see him? Dan looked at the sign and scratched his head and listened to what the people said. He grinned and he said, "Folks, I've got a skedaddle, but I sure would like that fancy saddle." Dan practiced riding day and night. His horse jumped every fence in sight. He practiced throwing his lariat till he could rope a cow clear over a hill. There he is again. Rodeo day dawned hot and fair. Folks for miles around were there. The skies were filled with whistles and cheers as the cowboys rode and roped wild steers. See that? But what really made the people shout was Fuzzy Dan when he walked out. He climbed the fence and waved, of course, then jumped down on the big wild horse. That bronco jumped and bucked and ran. He couldn't throw old Fuzzy Dan. The cowboy shouted long and loud and lifted Dan above the crowd. He held his hat and he waved his hand, and they carried him to the judges' stand. See there? Then he saw before his very eyes that silver-trimmed saddle with the sign, "First Prize." The judges said, "You're the very best bronco buster in the whole Wild West." See there? That's his prize. Fuzzy Dan won. Can you feel his chaps there? They're fuzzy. Can you feel them? Yeah. And that's the story of Fuzzy Dan.